The Minneapolis winter wind felt like a blade against my thin coat as I slid my scratched debit card across the cold granite counter. I only needed $900 to keep a roof over my head and my medical care going. But when the teller scanned it, sirens blared, and she leaned in to whisper a sentence that froze my blood. "You should not be here alone because this account is under priority protection. And someone has been hunting you for 5 years. My name is Nora Sanders, and the only thing protecting me from the biting Minneapolis wind was a coat that had lost its insulation 3 winters ago." I stood outside the heavy glass doors of the North Star Meridian Bank, watching my own reflection in the polished brass frame. The woman staring back at me looked like a ghost, or perhaps a fugitive. My face was pale, drawn tight against the cheekbones from skipped meals and double shifts. My hair, once a vibrant brown, was pulled back in a messy, fraying knot that screamed exhaustion. But it was the bandage wrapped clumsily around my left forearm that drew the most attention. It was stained slightly yellow at the edges, throbbing with a dull, rhythmic pain that synced perfectly with the pounding of my heart. My name is Nora Sanders. The card that set off those sirens came into my life 5 winters ago, on the night we buried my parents. If you want to understand why a battered piece of blue plastic could turn a routine withdrawal into a lockdown, you have to start there. The air in the house at Lake Briar always smelled of lemon polish and old paper. But that night, 5 years ago, it smelled of lilies and wet wool. It was a suffocating, dense scent that stuck to the back of my throat. The funeral reception had ended an hour ago. The last of the neighbors had mumbled their condolences, eaten the dry sandwiches, and tracked melting snow onto the hardwood floors before retreating to their warm, intact lives. The house was silent now, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was a sound that used to comfort me, a heartbeat of the home where I had spent 20 years of my life. Now, it sounded like a countdown. I sat on the edge of the velvet armchair in the living room, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Across from me, on the long beige sofa, sat my half-sister, Marla Greer. She did not look like someone who had just buried her mother and stepfather. She looked like a CEO at a board meeting she had already won. Her black dress was tailored to perfection, not a wrinkle in sight, and her posture was rigid, imperious. Beside her stood Calvin, her husband. He was leaning against the mantelpiece, swirling a glass of my father's scotch, his eyes scanning the room not with grief, but with appraisal. He was looking at the paintings, the antique vases, the heavy oak furniture. He was counting. "Shall we proceed?" Marla asked. Her voice was devoid of moisture. She did not have red eyes. She had not shed a tear since the police called us about the explosion at the packaging plant 3 days prior. The headlines were still screaming about the tragedy, about the fire that took 6 lives, including our parents. But Marla seemed to have moved past the mourning phase and straight into the acquisition phase. Mr. Elliot Granger, the family attorney, sat at the head of the coffee table. He looked tired. He was an old friend of my father, a man with kind eyes and shaky hands. He shuffled a stack of documents, refusing to make eye contact with me. That was my first warning, though I was too numb to recognize it then. "Nora, Mr. Granger said softly. He cleared his throat. "Marla, Calvin, as you know, your parents' will was updated 6 months ago. The nature of their death was unexpected, and the estate is complex due to the pending investigation into the fire at the plant. However, the distribution of personal assets is clear." "Get to it, Mo." "Elliot," Marla snapped. She checked her watch. "We have a long drive back to the city." Mr. Granger sighed. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. The legal jargon washed over me. I was not listening for money. I was listening for a sign that they were still here, that they had thought of me. I wanted to hear them talk about the piano I played, or the garden Mom and I planted. I wanted sentimental value, not market value. To my eldest daughter, Marla Greer. Mr. Granger read, his voice monotone. I bequeath the entirety of the Lake Briar estate, including the land, the primary residence, and all tangible contents therein. Furthermore, the remaining life insurance policies not tied to the business liability shall be transferred to her name to cover the maintenance of said property. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I blinked, trying to process the words, the entirety, the house, my room, Mom's jewelry, Dad's record collection, everything. And, Mr., Granger continued, his voice dropping a decibel. To Nora Sanders. I looked up. Hope is a cruel thing. It flared in my chest for a second. To Nora Sanders. We leave a cash stipend from the liquid savings account, intended to assist with her independent transition. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a plain white envelope. It was thin. It looked flimsy. He slid it across the polished wood of the coffee table toward me. The amount is $1,000. Mister, Granger whispered. I stared at the envelope. I did not move to touch it. $1,000. I repeated. My voice sounded small, like a child's. I don't understand. The house, this is my home. Mom and Dad said I could stay here until I finished my degree. They promised. Marla laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. She leaned forward and snatched the envelope off the table before I could reach for it. She held it up, inspecting it like it was a piece of trash. They promised a lot of things, Nora, Marla said, but promises are not legal documents. This is... She tapped the will with a manicured fingernail. The house is mine. The furniture is mine. The car in the driveway is mine. But why? I looked at Mr. Granger. Elliot, you knew them. You knew how much they loved me. Why would they do this? Mr. Granger looked pained. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to offer some context, but Marla cut him off. She stood up, her height looming over me. Because they knew you needed a push. Nora, she spat, you have been leeching off them for years, 27 years old and still living in your childhood bedroom. It is pathetic. I was helping them, I argued, my voice shaking. Mom was sick last year. I stayed to take care of her. You stayed because it was free. Calvin chimed in from the fireplace. He took a sip of the scotch. Let us be honest. Nora, you are not exactly a high achiever. The graphic design degree that went nowhere. The part-time jobs. I was building a portfolio, I said, tears finally spilling over. That is not fair. Marla ripped the envelope open. The sound of tearing paper was violent in the quiet room. She pulled out a plastic card, a debit card, and a slip of paper. She looked at it and sneered. Here, she said. She flicked her wrist. Tossing the card at me, it hit my chest and clattered onto the floor. Take it, Marla said. Consider it a severance package. I looked down at the blue plastic card on the Persian rug. It was the generic kind, a prepaid debit card you get when you do not have a real bank account. It felt dirty. I am their daughter too, I whispered. Marla's face twisted. The mask of civility dropped completely. She walked around the table and stood directly in front of me. She smelled of expensive perfume and cruelty. Are you, she asked softly, are you really? I froze. I am the blood daughter, Marla hissed. I came from her body. You were a project. You were a pity case they picked up from the foster system because they wanted to feel like saints. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I had known I was adopted since I was 5. My parents had never made it a secret, and they had never made it matter. They had always told me I was chosen, but Marla had always made me feel like an invader. That does not matter, I said, standing up to face her. They were my parents. They loved me. They felt sorry for you, Marla corrected. And now they are gone, which means the charity stops today. I am done subsidizing a stranger in my house. She turned to Calvin. Is the back door locked? Checked it myself, Calvin said, smirking. Marla turned back to me. You have 10 minutes to get out. What? I gasped. It is snowing. It is 10 degrees outside. And my clothes? my computer, my life is in that room upstairs. That room is in my house, Marla said. And everything inside the house is a tangible asset. That includes the bed you sleep on and the clothes in the closet. Technically, I could keep the clothes too, but I do not want your cheap rags cluttering my space. You cannot do this. I looked at Mr. Granger. Elliot, tell her she cannot do this. Eviction takes 30 days. I have rights. Mr. Granger stood up, gathering his papers. He looked ashamed. Marla, perhaps a grace period a few days to let her pack. No, Marla said. If I let her stay one night, she will claim squatter's rights. She leaves now. If she wants her things, she can petition me for them later. I will decide what is personal and what is an asset. She walked past me to the hallway and stood at the bottom of the stairs. She crossed her arms, blocking the way up. Do not even think about running up there, she warned. I will call the police and report a burglary in progress. Do you want that on your record? Nora. A foster kid stealing from a grieving family. Imagine the headlines. Panic rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I looked around the room. The photos on the mantel me at graduation. Me and Dad fishing felt like they were mocking me. They were just objects now, assets. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A gust of freezing wind swirled into the hallway, carrying snowflakes that danced in the warm light. Nathan stood in the doorway. My husband. He was wearing his EMT uniform, his boots covered in mud and slush. He looked exhausted, his eyes wide with worry. He had come straight from a 12-hour shift. He had missed the funeral service because of a pileup on the interstate, a fact that had eaten him alive all day. Nora, he called out, spotting me. He rushed in, kicking the door shut behind him. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. He smelled of rain and antiseptic. I am so sorry. I tried to get here sooner. God, I am so sorry. I clung to him, finally letting out a sob. He was solid. He was safe. It is okay. I wept. You are here now. Nathan pulled back and looked at the room. He saw Mr. Granger packing his briefcase. He saw Calvin sipping scotch, and he saw Marla blocking the stairs like a sentinel. What is going on? Nathan asked, sensing the tension. Why is everyone standing like this? We are just finishing up, Marla said breezily. Nora was just leaving. Nathan frowned. Leaving? We are staying here tonight. Nora is exhausted. Nora does not live here anymore, Marla said, and neither do you. In fact, you never did. This is private property. Nathan looked at me, confusion clouding his face. Nora. What is she talking about? She got the house, I choked out. She got everything, Nathan, and she is kicking us out. Now, Nathan's face hardened. He was a gentleman, a man who saved lives for a living. But he had a limit. He turned to Marla, his jaw tightening. You cannot be serious, Nathan said, stepping forward. Her parents died 3 days ago. You are her sister. Half-sister, Marla corrected. And this is not a debate. The will is clear. Get out. Nathan looked at Calvin. And you are okay with this. You are going to let your wife throw her sister out in a snowstorm. Calvin shrugged. It is Marla's house, buddy. I just live here. Nathan's hands curled into fists. He took a step toward Calvin, the air in the room charged with violence. I saw the look in Nathan's eyes, the protective rage. He was going to hit him. He was going to tear this house apart to defend me. No, I screamed. I grabbed Nathan's arm. Nathan, stop. They can't do this to you. Nathan growled, his voice shaking with anger. It is illegal. It is inhuman. I do not care, Marla said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Touch him, Nathan, and I will sue you for everything you have. I will ruin your career. You think the ambulance service keeps people with assault charges? Try me. I looked at Marla. She meant it. She had the money, the lawyers, and the malice. She would destroy him just to hurt me. I pulled on Nathan's arm, dragging him back. Nathan, please, Look at me. He looked down, his eyes blazing. Do not fight them, I begged. Not tonight. She wants you to hit him. She wants a reason to call the cops. We cannot win this right now. We cannot just leave, Nathan argued. Your things. Forget the things, I cried. I just need you. I just need to get out of here. I looked down at the floor and picked up the blue debit card. It was scratched against the grain of the wood. I shoved it into my pocket. It felt like a stone. Fine, Nathan spat at Marla. We are leaving, but this is not over. Oh, it is over, Marla smiled. It was a cold, triumphant smile. The locks will be changed by tomorrow morning. Do not come back. She walked to the front door and held it open. The wind howled outside, a white void of cold. Goodbye, Nora, she said. Good luck in the real world. I did not look at her. I grabbed my coat from the rack. The only thing I was allowed to take because I had worn it in. I took Nathan's hand. His palm was warm, but his grip was tense. We stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit us instantly, biting through my dress. Marla slammed the heavy oak door behind us. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed like a gunshot. We stood there for a moment in the swirling snow. I looked at the closed door, the wreath of white lilies still hanging on the knocker. I had grown up behind that door. I had learned to walk in that hallway, and now I was on the other side, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I would never cross that threshold again as a daughter. I was a stranger now. Nathan took off his heavy EMT jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. He was shivering in just his uniform shirt. We will get a lawyer, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We will fight this, Nora, I promise. I looked at the house, seeing Marla's silhouette in the window, watching us to make sure we left. No, I whispered, the wind stealing my voice. Promise me you will not fight her yet. Promise me. Nathan? Why? Because she has the high ground, I said, clutching the plastic card in my pocket. If we fight her now, she will crush us. We have to survive first. Nathan looked at me, pain etched into his features. He nodded slowly. Okay, Nora, whatever you say. He guided me down the icy steps to his beat-up sedan. As we drove away, I watched the house disappear into the white curtain of the storm. I touched the pocket where the card lay. $1,000. That was the price of my past. I did not know then that the card was a lie. I did not know it was a key. I just knew that I was cold and homeless, and the only family I had left was the man driving the car. But Marla had made a mistake. She thought she had thrown out trash. She did not realize she had thrown out a seed that would spend 5 years growing in the dark, waiting for the right moment to break the surface. The apartment belonged to a friend from college named Sarah, a girl I had not spoken to in 2 years, but who opened her door when I called her at midnight. Sobbing and incoherent. It was a third-floor walk-up in a complex that smelled permanently of industrial laundry detergent and burnt garlic. The living room was small, dominated by a beige microfiber sofa that had seen better decades, and that was where Nathan and I spent our first night of exile. We lay on that lumpy sofa, fully clothed, pressed together not for romance, but for warmth and a desperate need to confirm that we were still real. The streetlights outside filtered through the thin blinds, casting striped shadows across the room. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of Sarah's refrigerator and the sound of Nathan's breathing. It was ragged, shallow breathing. He was awake, staring into the dark just like I was, in my hand, hidden under the scratchy wool blanket. I held the card. It was warm now, heated by the friction of my thumb rubbing against the raised plastic numbers. I wanted to destroy it. A hot, violent urge clawed at my chest, telling me to snap it in half. I squeezed it between my fingers, bending the plastic until it bowed. I imagined the sound it would make, a sharp crack that would sever the last tie to the humiliation I had endured in the living room at Lake Briar. I did not want her money. I did not want her pity. I did not want anything that had touched Marla's hands. We should sue her, Nathan whispered into the dark. His voice was rough, cracking with a fury I had never heard before. "I will call around tomorrow. There are lawyers who work on contingency. We can contest the will." I stopped bending the card. The plastic relaxed back into its shape. "No," I said. My voice sounded dead in the small room. Nathan shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. "Nora, she stole your inheritance. She stole your home. We cannot just let her take it. We have $40. Nathan," I said, turning my head to look at his silhouette. "Contesting a will takes months, maybe years, and while we are fighting, we still have to eat. We still have to live." "It is the principle," he argued, though the conviction in his voice was already wavering under the weight of our reality. "Principles are for people who have a roof," I replied. "If we sue her now, she will bury us. She has the estate's money. She has Calvin's connections. She will drag it out until we are bankrupt and broken. She wants us to fight so she can crush us completely." I felt the card in my palm. It was hard and unforgiving. "So we just let her win?" Nathan asked. "No," I said. "We survive. That is how we fight her right now. We survive." I slipped the card into the deepest pocket of my wallet, behind my library card and an old receipt. I did not break it. I kept it. But I made a silent vow to the ceiling of that cramped apartment. I would never spend a cent of it. I would keep it as an artifact. It was no longer money. It was evidence. It was a physical reminder of the night my sister looked at me and decided I was worth exactly $1,000 to erase. Every time I opened my wallet, I would see the blue edge of that card, and I would remember the rage. That rage would be my fuel. We stayed with Sarah for 3 weeks. It was a masterclass in humiliation. We tried to be invisible. We folded our blankets the second we woke up. We bought our own groceries with the meager earnings from Nathan's overtime shifts, labeling our milk with a Sharpie so we would not be accused of taking hers. But the apartment was too small for 3 adults. I could feel the tension in the air. The way Sarah stopped making eye contact. The way she sighed when she saw our bags still in the corner. We were an imposition, a reminder of misfortune that she wanted out of her space. We found a place in St. Louis Park. To call it an apartment was generous. It was a basement unit in a house that was slowly sinking into the Minnesota mud. The rent was low enough that we could scrape it together if we skipped lunch and walked to work. But the cost was paid in dignity. The walls were made of cinder block painted a glossy, institutional cream color that wept moisture whenever it rained. The windows were narrow slits at ground level, offering a panoramic view of the tires of parked cars and the boots of passing strangers. The air always smelled of wet earth and mildew, a dampness that seeped into our clothes and settled in our bones. We moved in on a Tuesday. We had no furniture. We slept on a mattress we found on the curb, sanitized with 3 bottles of bleach spray. We ate dinner sitting on the floor, using a cardboard box as a table. "It is temporary," Nathan said, trying to sound cheerful as he hammered a nail into the concrete wall to hang his jacket. "Just until we get back on our feet." But getting back on our feet felt like trying to climb a greased wall. I took a job at Haven Ridge Benefit Solutions. It was a data entry role, the kind of job designed to strip the soul from the body slowly, hour by hour. I sat in a gray cubicle under buzzing fluorescent lights, typing numbers from one spreadsheet to another for $12 an hour. My degree in graphic design, my portfolio, my creative dreams, they were all packed away in a box under the bed, gathering dust, at Haven Ridge. I was not Nora Sanders the artist. I was employee number 492. I was invisible. But the day job was not enough to cover the rent and the mounting debt from the funeral costs that Marla had conveniently forwarded to me. So, I took a second job. At 5 in the evening, I would clock out of Haven Ridge, change in the bathroom, and catch the bus to a diner called Cedar and Spoon. It was a greasy spoon joint that pretended to be rustic, serving overpriced hash browns to hipsters and truckers alike. My life became a blur of motion and exhaustion. I learned the rhythm of servitude, I learned to balance 4 plates on one arm while dodging a line cook with a temper. I learned that the smell of old fryer oil does not wash out of hair. It layers on, day after day, until you smell like a French fry even after a shower. My hands, once used for drawing and playing the piano, became rough. The skin on my knuckles cracked from the cold and the harsh dish soap. My feet swelled until my shoes felt 2 sizes too small. And my marriage, the one thing I thought was invincible, began to fray. It was not a dramatic explosion. It was a slow erosion. Nathan was working double shifts at the ambulance station, picking up every overtime slot available. We became ships passing in the night. He would be leaving as I was coming home. I would be waking up as he was collapsing into bed. When we were together, we were too tired to talk. We were too tired to touch. We sat in the damp basement, eating leftovers, staring at the wall. The romance was stripped away by the brutal mathematics of poverty. We argued about the electric bill. We argued about whether we could afford to fix the heater in the car. We argued because we were scared, and it was easier to snap at each other than to scream at the world. "You look tired," Nathan said one night, watching me rub my swollen ankles. "I am fine," I snapped, too sharp. "We need the tips." "I can pick up another shift," he offered, his eyes dark with his own fatigue. "You are already working 60 hours a week." "Nathan," I said, "you are going to crash the ambulance if you do not sleep." "I am trying to help," he said, his voice rising. "I am trying to get us out of this hole." "I know." I softened, reaching out to touch his hand, but his hand was calloused and dry, just like mine. We were 2 drowning people trying to keep each other afloat, but sometimes it felt like we were just pulling each other down. Meanwhile, Marla was living the life she had stolen. In the age of social media, you cannot truly escape anyone. I did not follow her, but our mutual acquaintances did. The algorithms fed me her life in bite-sized pieces. I saw photos of the house at Lake Briar. She had repainted the shutters black. She had cut down the old oak tree my father loved because it blocked the light. Rumors trickled down to me like acid. I heard from a former neighbor that Marla was hosting lavish dinner parties. She bought a brand new luxury SUV, a white beast that gleamed in the driveway where my old sedan used to sit. She was calling herself the Lady of Lake Briar, volunteering at charity galas, wearing my mother's pearls as she smiled for the cameras. People said she was generous. People said she was grieving so gracefully. I knew the truth. I knew the parties were not just for show. They were a frantic attempt to buy status. Marla had always been terrible with money. She needed validation like a junkie needs a fix. The new car, the renovations, the clothes, it was all a facade. She was spending money she did not earn to impress people she did not like. One night in February, the heater in the basement finally died. The temperature dropped to 50 degrees inside the apartment. I sat by the narrow window, wrapped in 3 blankets, watching the snow pile up against the glass. Nathan was asleep on the mattress behind me. He was snoring softly, his mouth open, his face gray with exhaustion. He looked 10 years older than he was. He had aged a decade and 5 months. I felt a surge of guilt so sharp it nearly doubled me over. I had dragged him into this. If he had not married me, if he had not stood up to Marla, maybe he would be okay. Maybe he would be warm. I reached for my purse and pulled out the wallet. I dug past the crumpled dollar bills and found the card. It was still pristine, mocking me with its untouched magnetic strip. $1,000. I could take it. I could go to the ATM right now. I could buy a space heater. I could buy warm boots. I could buy a week of groceries that were not instant noodles. It would be so easy. Just one swipe. Just one moment of weakness. I stared at the embossed name on the card. Nora Sanders. If I used it, I was accepting her narrative. I was admitting that she was the benevolent benefactor and I was the charity case. I was admitting that I needed her. I looked back at Nathan. He shifted in his sleep, pulling his knees to his chest for warmth. I put the card back. I would freeze before I gave her the satisfaction. I would work until my bones turned to dust before I let her think she had saved me. Not yet, I whispered to the cold glass. You do not get to win. Marla, not while I am still breathing. I pressed my hand against the freezing window pane. The cold burned my skin. It hurt, but it woke me up. It reminded me that I was still here. I was in the basement, in the dirt, but I was still here, and as long as I held on to that card without using it, I held on to the one thing she could not take in probate court, my hate. It was the only thing keeping me warm. Time did not flow in our basement apartment. It dripped. It leaked like the rusty pipe above the shower. A slow, torturous accumulation of moments that eventually filled 5 years. If you asked me to describe the last 60 months, I would not talk about seasons or holidays. I would talk about the smell of old fryer grease. It was a scent that defied chemistry. It did not just sit on the skin. It burrowed into the pores. It lived in my hair follicles. It stained my pillowcases a faint, sickly yellow no matter how much bleach I poured into the washing machine. I worked the dinner shift at Cedar and Spoon 5 nights a week, carrying plates of eggs and sausage to truckers and insomniacs, and every night I came home smelling like a deep fryer that had not been cleaned since the Reagan administration. But before the grease, there was the dust. That was my day existence. At 8 in the morning, I clocked in at Haven Ridge Benefit Solutions. It was a sterile, gray purgatory of cubicles where I processed medical claims for $14 an hour. My job was to look at a screen, find a reason to deny payment for someone's insulin or physical therapy, and type a code into a box. I was a professional disappointer. I spent 8 hours listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the click-clack of keyboards, my back curving into the shape of the cheap office chair. My hands, the hands that used to sketch charcoal portraits and play Chopin, were now unrecognizable. The skin was dry and cracked, mapping the geography of my labor. I had a permanent callus on my right thumb from opening boxes of frozen fries, and my cuticles were always ragged from shuffling paperwork. I lived my life in the clearance aisle. I knew exactly what time the grocery store marked down the day-old bread. I knew which gas station had the cheapest coffee, though I usually just drank hot water with lemon to trick my stomach into thinking it was full. Nathan and I stopped buying clothes. We wore what we had until the fabric thinned and the seams gave way, and then I mended them with a sewing kit I had stolen from a hotel room years ago. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It is a lack of mental space. It is a constant, low-level hum of panic in the back of your skull. It is waking up at 3 in the morning doing mental math. If I pay the electric bill, we have $20 for food. If I pay for gas, we cannot pay the internet. If the car breaks down, we are dead. Nathan tried. God, he tried. He took every contract job he could find. He drove for a rideshare app until his eyes were bloodshot. He did landscaping on weekends, coming home smelling of mulch and sweat, his muscles trembling so hard he could barely hold a fork. But the economy was a beast that ate effort and spit out debt. The cost of living in Minneapolis climbed every year, but our wages stayed flat. Pinned to the ground by gravity, we stopped talking about the future. We stopped talking about children. Bringing a child into our basement felt like a crime. Instead, we fought. We fought about the thermostat. We fought about who left the light on. We fought about the price of cheese. These were not loud, dramatic fights. They were quiet, exhausted skirmishes. They were the friction of 2 people trapped in a box that was slowly shrinking. You need new boots, Nathan said one evening in November of the 4th year. He was looking at my feet, where the sole of my boot had separated from the leather, held together by duct tape. They are fine, I said, chopping onions for a soup that was mostly water. They are not fine. Nora, your socks are wet when you come home. You are going to get frostbite. We do not have the money. Nathan, I said, slamming the knife down, unless you want to stop paying the car insurance. I can pick up an extra shift, he said, his voice tight. You are already working 7 days a week. I turned to face him. Nathan looked at the card, and his expression hardened. Put it away. Why? I challenged him. Why are we suffering? Nathan, It is just pride. It is stupid, useless pride. It is not pride, he said. It is dignity. If you use that card, you are telling her she was right. You are telling her that you are nothing without her scraps. He was right, and I hated him for it. I hated him because he was the keeper of my conscience. I shoved the card back into the wallet. It sat there, a radioactive isotope of potential energy, burning a hole in my pocket. Marla was not just a memory. She was a digital specter. I did not follow her, but the world made sure I saw her. One night at the diner, I was bussing a table when I saw a discarded local magazine. On the cover, smiling beneath a headline that read, "The New Philanthropists of Minneapolis," was Marla. She looked radiant. She was wearing a silver gown, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She was holding a glass of champagne, and her arm was linked through Calvin's. He looked heavier, his face flush with what I assumed was expensive scotch and self-satisfaction. I took the magazine into the back alley on my break. I read the article under the flickering yellow security light. Marla Greer, owner of the historic Lake Briar estate, speaks on the importance of community. "My parents taught me that family is everything," Greer says. "We build our legacy by holding on to our roots." I felt bile rise in my throat. Family is everything. The audacity was breathtaking. She had kicked her sister out into a snowstorm, and now she was using our parents' memory to sell her image as a benevolent matriarch. But as I read further, I noticed the cracks. The article mentioned that Marla and Calvin were active investors in several new ventures, including a cryptocurrency exchange and a boutique real estate firm. It sounded impressive to the casual reader, but I knew Calvin. Calvin was a man who thought he was the smartest person in the room because he spoke the loudest. He was a gambler who called it investing. Then came the rumors. Minneapolis is a big city, but the service industry is a small village. A bartender at a high-end club told me he served Calvin regularly. He said Calvin tipped big when he was winning, but lately, his cards were getting declined. A girl I worked with at Haven Ridge had a cousin who worked at the county clerk's office. She mentioned, in passing, that the Lake Briar estate had been refinanced. Twice. "They are pulling equity out," I told Nathan one night. "They are using the house as an ATM. "It does not matter," Nathan said, rubbing his temples. "It is not our house anymore, but it did matter." It felt like watching someone drive a car you loved off a cliff. She had stolen my inheritance, and she wasn't even preserving it. She was burning it. And then, the strange things started happening. It began with a phone call. I was at Haven Ridge, staring at a spreadsheet, when my cell phone buzzed. It was a number I did not recognize. "Hello? Is this Nora Sanders?" a voice asked. It was a recorded voice, the kind used by debt collectors. "We are attempting to collect a debt regarding your overdue payment for..." I hung up immediately. Scammers called everyone. It meant nothing. But a week later, a letter arrived at our old P.O. box, the one we had kept just in case. It was a foreclosure warning for a property I had never owned, addressed to a Nora Sanders. I showed it to Nathan. "It is a mistake," he said, examining the paper. "Common name. There must be another Nora Sanders in the state who is in trouble." "It has my middle initial," I said, pointing to the line, Nora J. Sanders. "And it was sent to the address on my old license, the one I had before Mom and Dad died." "Maybe it is just a mix-up in the database," Nathan reasoned. "Data breaches happen all the time." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the universe was just incompetent, not malicious. I threw the letter away. I did not have the energy to chase down a clerical error. I had a 12-hour shift to survive, but the unease settled in my stomach like a stone. It felt personal. It felt like the walls were closing in, like someone was using my name to build a cage I could not see. The breaking point did not come with a bang. It came with a whisper. It was a Tuesday in January, exactly 5 years and 2 days after the funeral. I was in the storage room of Cedar and Spoon. It was 1 a.m. The restaurant was closed, but I had to do inventory on the canned tomatoes. The storage room was freezing. The heater in the building was broken again. I was wearing my coat over my apron, shivering as I counted large metal cans. 1, 2, 3. I looked at my hands. They were blue with cold. The bandage on my arm, fresh from the burn I had gotten 3 days ago, was stiff and uncomfortable. I looked at the shelf. There was a small, reflective surface on the side of a stainless steel toaster. I saw my face. I did not recognize the woman staring back. She looked 40, not 32. Her eyes were dull, rimmed with dark circles that no amount of sleep would cure. Her mouth was set in a permanent line of endurance. She looked like a woman who was waiting for permission to exist. I put the clipboard down. 5 years, 1,825 days. I had spent every single one of them reacting. I had reacted to Marla's cruelty. I had reacted to the bills. I had reacted to the hunger. I had been playing defense for half a decade, curling into a ball and hoping the blows would stop, but they were not stopping. The bills were getting higher. My body was breaking down. My marriage was becoming a partnership of survival, not love. Marla was out there, wearing silver gowns and drinking champagne, burning through the legacy my parents had built. And I was here, counting cans of tomatoes in the dark, clutching a piece of plastic I was too proud to use but too scared to destroy. I was not living. I was haunting my own life. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked forward with a mechanical jerk. Tick, tick, tick. It was the sound of my life running out. Enough, I whispered to the stacks of flour sacks. The word hung in the cold air. I did not know what I was going to do. I did not know that in less than 24 hours, I would be sliding that scratched card across a marble counter. I did not know that the world was about to turn upside down. All I knew, standing in that freezing pantry, was that I could not do day 1,826. Something had to break, and if the world would not break for me, I would have to break it myself. I finished the inventory. I turned off the lights. I walked out into the snow, where Nathan was waiting in our rusting car, the engine idling to keep the heat on. I got in. He looked at me, his eyes full of the same tired love he had worn for 5 years. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Yes," I said, but as we drove through the dark streets of Minneapolis, passing the high-rise condos where the rich slept in warm beds, I touched the wallet in my pocket. I was ready to go home, but not to the basement. I was ready to go home, and the next day, when the floor at the diner was wet and my boots had no grip, gravity finally gave me the push I needed. It happened on a Tuesday night, the kind of shift that restaurant workers call a grinder. The diner was packed, a chaotic sea of wet coats and demanding voices clamoring for coffee and comfort food against the Minneapolis freeze. The air was thick with the smell of bacon grease and wet wool. I was moving on autopilot, my body a machine calibrated to weave between tables, dodge bussers, and balance heavy ceramic plates on a tray that felt like it weighed a ton. I was carrying a tray with 3 lumberjack specials steaming platters of eggs, sausages, and pancakes drowning in syrup and 2 mugs of boiling hot coffee. Table 4 was waving at me. The line cook was shouting for a pickup. The noise was a physical pressure against my temples. I turned the corner near the dish pit. I did not see the puddle. The dishwasher had dropped a bucket of mop water moments before and had not put up the yellow sign yet. My right boot hit the slick tile and lost all traction. It happened in slow motion, the way disasters always do. I felt gravity seize my ankle and yank it sideways. My legs went out from under me. Instinct took over, and I threw my left arm out to break the fall, forgetting in that split second that my body was not as resilient as it used to be. I hit the concrete floor with a bone-jarring slam. Crack! The sound came from inside my arm, a sickening, wet pop that vibrated all the way up to my neck. An instant later, the tray followed. The plates shattered, sending eggs and pancakes flying. But it was the coffee that did the damage. One of the mugs landed squarely next to my cheek and exploded, sending a wave of scalding dark liquid splashing across my neck and down into the collar of my uniform. I screamed. I could not help it. The pain was two-headed, the searing, white-hot burn on my skin, and the deep, nausea-inducing throb in my left forearm. The diner went silent. The clatter of forks stopped. Every eye turned to the waitress sprawled in the garbage on the floor. Nora, the manager. A man named Rick, who cared more about his food cost percentage than his human staff, rushed over. He did not ask if I was okay. He looked at the shattered plates. Christ, look at this mess. Do not move. You are going to get glass in your skin. I tried to push myself up, but when I put weight on my left hand, the world turned white. A gasp tore out of my throat, and I collapsed back onto the wet tile. My arm, I whispered, clutching it to my chest. I think I broke something. The urgent care clinic smelled of bleach and despair. We waited for 3 hours in plastic chairs that dug into our spines. When the doctor finally saw me, he was efficient and unsympathetic. He manipulated my arm, ignoring my flinching, and shone a light on the angry red blister forming on my neck. It is a severe sprain, he said, typing on his tablet without looking at me. You tore the ligaments in your wrist, and you have second-degree burns on the neck and shoulder. I am wrapping it, but you need to keep it immobile. For how long, I asked. 6 weeks minimum for the ligaments to heal properly, he said. If you stress it, you are looking at surgery. Do you have insurance? No, I said. The word was heavy as lead. Right. Well, keep it elevated, ice it, and absolutely no lifting anything heavier than a cup of tea. No lifting. The words echoed in my head as we drove home in silence. No lifting meant no trays. No trays meant no tips. No tips meant no rent. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The next morning, I called Haven Ridge Benefit Solutions. I told my supervisor about the accident. I told him I could still type with one hand, that I would just be a little slower. I am sorry, Nora, he said, his voice smooth and corporate. But we are entering the end-of-quarter rush. We need high-volume output. If you cannot hit the keystroke metrics, I cannot keep you on the schedule. We will move you to inactive status until you are fully recovered. Inactive status. It was a polite way of saying unemployed. Then I called Cedar and Spoon. Rick was less polite. You slipped, he asked. There was a wet floor sign. Nora. I saw it. There was no sign. Rick, I said, gripping the phone with my good hand. Tony put it up after I fell. That is not what the report says, Rick said. Look, if you cannot work, you cannot work, but do not expect workers' compensation. You violated safety protocol by running in the kitchen. We will mail you your last check. He hung up. I sat on the edge of the mattress in the basement, the phone still in my hand. My left arm was encased in a heavy ace bandage and a sling. My neck was slathered in burn cream that stuck to my shirt. We had $42 in the bank. 3 days later, the notice appeared on our door. It was bright pink, taped aggressively at eye level so the neighbors could see. Past due, pay or quit. The landlord, a man who drove a Lexus and complained about property taxes, was not interested in sob stories. We were 5 days late on rent, in Minnesota, in winter. Eviction laws were strict, but he knew the loopholes. He could make our lives hell before the sheriff even showed up. Then the bill from the urgent care arrived. It sat on the counter like a bomb. $1,200. That was just for the x-rays, the doctor's time, and the bandage. They had added a note payment due upon receipt. Failure to pay will result in immediate transfer to a collections agency. I sat at the small, wobbly table, staring at the pile of paper. The pain in my arm was a dull, constant throb, a rhythm section to the panic rising in my chest. Nathan came home an hour later. He looked gray. He had picked up a double shift at the warehouse, lifting boxes until his back seized up. But it was not enough. The pay cycle was 2 weeks out. We needed money now. He saw the pink slip on the table. He saw the medical bill. He slumped into the chair opposite me and put his head in his hands. I can go to that place on Franklin Avenue, he said, his voice muffled. The payday loan place. They give cash same day. No, I said instantly. Nathan, The interest rates are 400%. If we take $500, we will owe them $2,000 by summer. It is quicksand. We will never get out. Then what do we do? He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. I can call my uncle in Wisconsin. Maybe he can loan us something. Your uncle who made you pay for your own dinner at your graduation. I shook my head. He will humiliate you. Nathan, he will make you beg, and then he will say no. I cannot watch you do that. We have to do something. Nathan slammed his hand on the table. We are going to be on the street. Nora, literally on the street. With your arm like that, in this cold, we will die. He was right. This was not just about discomfort anymore. This was about survival. I looked at my purse hanging on the hook by the door. It looked saggy and tired, much like its owner. Inside that purse was a wallet. And inside that wallet was a piece of blue plastic that I had not touched in 5 years. $1,000. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to fix our lives, but it was $900 more than we had. It was enough to pay the rent. It was enough to buy antibiotics for my burn so it did not turn septic. It was enough to buy us a month of breathing room. Nora, Nathan said, following my gaze. Don't. Why not? I whispered. Why are we doing this, Nathan? Why are we starving ourselves to prove a point to a woman who does not even know we exist? Because it is her money, Nathan said. It is poison. It is my money, I snapped. The anger flared up, hot and sudden, overriding the pain in my arm. It was my parents' money. She stole it. She stole everything. This tiny crumb she threw at me. It is not a gift. It is restitution. It is the smallest fraction of what is owed to me. I stood up. My head spun a little from the pain medication and the lack of food, but I steadied myself against the table. I am not taking it as charity, I said, my voice hardening. I am taking it back. I am repossessing it. Nathan looked at me. He saw the look in my eyes, the cornered animal look. He knew he could not stop me. Just enough for the rent, he pleaded. Do not take it all. Leave something so the account stays open. If you close it, she might get a notification. I know, I said. 900. That is all I need. I put on my coat. It was a struggle to get my injured arm through the sleeve, and I had to drape the coat over my left side like a cape. I wrapped a scarf around my neck to hide the burn cream. I will drive you, Nathan said, reaching for the keys. No, I said. I need to do this alone. I need to walk. I need the air. I walked out of the basement and into the biting wind. The cold slapped my face, stinging my eyes. But it felt good. It felt real. The walk to the bank was 12 blocks. My boots crunched on the frozen gray slush. Every step sent a jolt of pain up my spine, but I focused on the rhythm. Left, right, survive. Halfway there, I stopped at a crosswalk. A group of college girls was standing next to me, huddled together. Looking at a phone, they were laughing. God, look at that water, one of them said. I wish I was there right now. I glanced at the screen. It was Instagram. And there she was. It was not a coincidence. It was the universe laughing at me. The algorithm had pushed Marla's post to the top of the Explore page for anyone in Minneapolis, probably because she had paid to boost it. The photo was high definition, saturated with colors that did not exist in my world. Marla was standing on the deck of a yacht. The water behind her was a shocking turquoise. She was wearing a white bikini and a sheer sarong, holding a wide-brimmed hat. She looked tan, fit, and spectacularly wealthy. The caption read, Winter Blues. Never heard of her. Sending warmth from St. Bart's, #family vacation, #blessed, #grateful. I stared at the screen over the girl's shoulder until the light changed. Blessed. My sister was drinking cocktails on a yacht in the Caribbean, spending the money my father had worked 40 years to save. She was soaking up the sun while I was walking to a bank with a torn ligament and a foreclosure notice in my pocket. About to withdraw the hush money she had thrown at me like a bone to a dog. The rage that hit me was not hot. It was cold. It was colder than the wind off the Mississippi River. It froze the tears in my ducts. It stiffened my spine. I had been feeling guilty about using the card. I had felt like I was failing. But looking at that photo, the guilt evaporated. She had taken the house. She had taken the inheritance. She had taken my parents' legacy. Fine, I would take the $900. Not because I needed it, though I did, but because it was the first time in 5 years I was refusing to play the victim she wanted me to be. She wanted me to disappear. Too bad. I was still here. I walked the rest of the way to the North Star Meridian Bank with a new energy. I did not look down at the sidewalk. I looked straight ahead. I reached the heavy glass doors. I saw my reflection, the battered coat, the sling, the pale face, but this time, I did not see a ghost. I saw a creditor coming to collect. I pushed the door open. The heat hit me. The smell of money hit me. I walked to the teller line. I waited. I stepped up to the counter. I pulled out the blue card. It was scratched. It was warped. It was the key to my shame and my salvation. I need to make a withdrawal, I told the teller. Tiffany. $900. She took the card. She looked at it with disdain. She slid it into the machine, and then the siren began. The sound, the piercing digital scream that stopped the world. It was not just a noise. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. But as the red light flashed on her screen, and the security guard turned toward me, a strange thought crossed my mind. If Marla had set a trap for me, it meant she was still thinking about me. And if she was thinking about me, she was afraid of me. I stood my ground as the manager rushed over. I held my head up. Let the sirens wail. Let them look. I was done hiding in the basement. The silence in the private suite was heavier than the silence in the basement had ever been. It was a pressurized, hermetically sealed silence that pressed against my eardrums. I sat in the leather chair, clutching my injured arm against my chest, staring at the glass of water Tiffany had placed in front of me. The water was trembling, sending tiny concentric ripples from the center of the glass to the rim, mirroring the tremors in my own body. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager who had looked at me with such pity only minutes ago, was now pacing the length of the small room. He was sweating. It was a cold sweat that made his forehead shine under the recessed lighting. He kept glancing at the door, then at his watch, and then, with a look of terrified reverence, at the scratched blue plastic card sitting in the center of the mahogany table. He had placed it there on a velvet coaster, as if it were a radioactive isotope or a crown jewel. "I am going to jail," I said. It was not a question. My voice sounded flat, detached from reality. "That is what is happening. Right, Marla reported it stolen. You are just waiting for the police." Mr. Henderson stopped pacing. He turned to me, his eyes wide behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He looked horrified, but not at me. He looked horrified on my behalf. "Ms. Sanders, please," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "No one is calling the police. The police do not have the clearance to be involved in this." "Then why did the alarm go off?" I asked. "Why are you looking at me like I am holding a grenade?" He walked over to the table and sat down opposite me. He folded his hands, composing himself. "The alarm was not a fraud alert, Ms. Sanders. It was a proximity alert, a priority trust code. In my 20 years of banking, I have only heard the rumor of such a thing. I have never actually seen a terminal trigger one." He reached out and touched the edge of the card with his index finger, then pulled back quickly. "This," he said, nodding at the piece of plastic I had almost snapped in half a dozen times, "is not a debit card. It never was. It looks like a standard issue checking instrument. It has a magnetic strip. It has a chip. But those are camouflage." "Camouflage," I repeated. "It came with a balance slip. $1,000. A placeholder," Henderson said. "A construct designed to make the object appear mundane. If anyone other than you had tried to use this card, if they had tried to swipe it at a gas station or an ATM, without your biometric signature matching the camera feed, or without the specific PIN sequence it would have shown a decline, or perhaps a balance of 0. But I used it, I said. I gave it to the teller. And the moment it was swiped, Henderson said, the system recognized the encryption key buried in the chip. It recognized you. It unlocked the gate. He turned his computer monitor around so I could see it. I do not have access to the full details of the trust, he said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. My security clearance is level 3. This account is sealed at level 5, but I can see the header, and I can see the current liquidity. I looked at the screen. The text was black against a stark white background. Account name, the Sanders Legacy Trust. Beneficiary, Nora J. Sanders. Status active / unlocked. And below that, a number. I blinked. I leaned forward, the pain in my arm forgotten for a second. I counted the commas. It was not $900. It was not $1,000. $2,482,000. Henderson read the number aloud, his voice shaking slightly. And some change. I stopped breathing. The air in the room vanished. That is impossible, I whispered. My parents. They were comfortable. They had the house. They had savings. But they were not. This isn't real. This is a mistake. It is not a mistake, Henderson said. I can see the intake sources. The initial principal was deposited 5 years ago. It includes the entirety of your father's liquid assets, his retirement accounts, and, he squinted at the screen, a significant settlement payout from the insurance company regarding the industrial accident, and a secondary settlement from the wrongful death suit filed against the packaging plant. I stared at him. The wrongful death suit. I never filed a suit. Marla said the company was bankrupt. She said there was no money. Someone filed it, Henderson said. And they won. The settlement was deposited directly into this trust 4 years ago. It has been sitting here, aggressively invested in high-yield bonds, compounding interest while you... He stopped. He looked at my frayed coat. He looked at the burn on my neck. He looked at the bandage. While I was starving, I finished the sentence for him. There is something else, Henderson said. He typed a command, and a red dialog box popped up on the screen. It pulsed with a warning that seemed to bleed into the room. Restricted access. Protected beneficiary. Warning: do not disclose existence to third parties. Specific exclusion: Marla Greer. Marla, I breathed. Her name looked violent on the screen. The trust is explicitly codified to be invisible to her, Henderson explained. But here is the disturbing part. Ms. Sanders, look at the access log. He pointed to a list of dates and times scrolling down the side of the screen. These are failed inquiry attempts, he said. Someone has been trying to find this money. Look at the dates. I looked. January 12th, 2 years ago. The week Marla bought the new car. March 4th, last year. The week I heard she refinanced the house. Last Tuesday. The day I slipped and fell at the diner. Someone has been running Social Security traces, Henderson said darkly. They have been hiring private investigators to check for dormant accounts in your name. They have been checking the unclaimed property database every single month for 5 years. They knew the money existed, or they suspected it, but they could not find where it was buried. She knew, I said, a cold realization washing over me. She knew Mom and Dad didn't leave her the cash. She got the house, but she didn't get the money. She thought I had it. That is why she hates me. She thought I was hiding it. She could not access it because the card, the physical key, was with you. Henderson said, if you had lost this card, or if you had destroyed it. I almost did, I whispered. I almost cut it up 100 times. If you had, Henderson said gravely, the trust would have dissolved into a charitable donation fund after 10 years of inactivity. That is the clause I see here. It was a failsafe. A knock on the glass door made us both jump. Mr. Henderson stood up immediately. Buttoning his jacket, he looked relieved, as if the burden of this knowledge was too heavy for him to carry alone. "He is here," Henderson said. "Who?" I asked, gripping the arms of the chair. The door opened. A man stepped in. He was shaking off a heavy wool coat covered in fresh snow. He wore a scarf that looked like it had been knitted by hand. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was completely white now, and his posture was stooped. But his eyes were the same. It was Elliot Granger. My parents' lawyer. The man who had read the will. The man who had sat silently while Marla threw me out into the blizzard. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You," I said. My voice was a mixture of shock and betrayal. "You were there. You let her do it. You gave me the envelope with the $1,000. Elliot did not smile. He looked at me with an expression of profound sorrow and exhaustion. He placed a leather briefcase on the table next to the card. "Please, sit down, Nora," he said. His voice was raspy, the voice of a man who had not slept well in a very long time. "I do not want to sit," I said, backing away. "You helped her. You drew up the will that gave her the house." "I drew up the will your parents asked for," Elliot said gently. "And I executed the instructions exactly as your father made me swear to do." "They wanted me homeless," I cried, the tears finally spilling over. "They wanted me to live in a basement for 5 years. Look at me. Elliot, look at my arm. I have been scrubbing floors and eating expired food because of you." Elliot winced. He looked at my injury, and for a moment, his professional mask slipped. He looked devastated. "No," he said softly. "They did not want that. They wanted you safe, and they knew the only way to keep you safe was to make you invisible." He opened the briefcase. He pulled out a thick, sealed envelope made of heavy linen paper. It was yellowed with age. Next to it, he placed a small silver flash drive. "5 years ago," Elliot said. "Your father came to my office 3 days before the fire. He was terrified. Nora, he had discovered something about the business finances, about debts that Marla and Calvin had incurred in his name, about dangerous people they had borrowed from." I froze. "What? If he had left you the money openly," Elliot continued, "Marla would have taken it. She would have sued you, or Calvin would have coerced you, or the creditors they were indebted to would have come after you. You were the soft target. Nora, you were the one with the big heart. They would have bled you dry in 6 months. So he gave it to Marla. He gave Marla the house because it was already leveraged," Elliot said. "He gave her the tangible assets because they were the bait. He needed her to feel like she won. He needed her to focus on the house so she would not look for the cash." "But why wait?" I asked. "Why 5 years? Why did you not tell me?" "Because of the condition," Elliot said. He pointed to the card. "Your mother made me swear an oath. She said, 'Do not find Nora. Do not help Nora. Not until she is ready.' They believed that if I gave you the money then, you would have tried to save Marla. You would have used it to bail out the family. You would have thrown yourself into the fire to save the sister who despised you." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. He was right. 5 years ago, I would have paid off the debts. I would have tried to buy Marla's love. "The trust was designed with a specific trigger," Elliot explained. "It could only be activated by the physical use of the card in a moment of distress. Your parents gambled. Nora, they gambled that you would be strong enough to survive without it, and proud enough not to use it until you absolutely had to. They wanted you to be forged by the fire, not consumed by it." "I almost broke," I whispered. "I am broken, Elliot." "No," he said, looking at me with a fierce intensity. "You are still standing. Marla is the one who is broken. She has burned through everything. The house is in foreclosure as of this morning. The creditors are circling. She is drowning. Nora, and you are standing on dry land." He pushed the linen envelope toward me. "This is from your mother," he said. "She wrote it the night before the funeral service. She gave it to me to hold until this day." Then he pushed the silver flash drive forward. "And this," he said, "is a video deposition. Your father recorded it in my office. It explains everything: the debts, The fire, the reason they had to do this to you. It contains the evidence of what Marla and Calvin did to the company. I looked at the drive. It was so small, yet it contained the answers to half a decade of suffering. If you watch this, Elliot said, his voice grave, you will have a choice. The trust gives you the resources to walk away. You can take the $2 million, move to Europe, and never think of the name Greer again. You can be free. Or, I asked. Or, Elliot said, you can use the evidence on that drive and the resources in this account to finish what your father started. You can hold them accountable. But if you do that, Nora, it will not be a quiet life. It will be a war. I looked at the envelope. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the front. For Nora. My heart. Then I looked at the flash drive. I thought about the basement. I thought about Nathan's gray face as he slept. I thought about the smell of the fryer grease. I thought about Marla on the yacht, drinking champagne while I counted pennies. I reached out with my good hand. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the drive. I do not want a quiet life, I said. I have been quiet for 5 years. Mr. Henderson handed me a tablet. He had plugged the drive in. The screen was black, with a simple triangular play button in the center. Are you sure? Elliot asked. Once you know, you cannot unknow it. I need to know, I said. I pressed play. The video file opened with a burst of static, a harsh white noise that made me flinch in the quiet luxury of the private banking suite. Then, the image stabilized. The breath left my body in a sharp, painful gasp. It was the living room at Lake Briar, but not the version Marla had created with her stark minimalism and expensive art. This was my living room. The walls were still painted that warm, soft sage green my mother loved. The curtains were the heavy floral ones that smelled of dust and sunlight. And sitting on the old, overstuffed beige sofa, the one Marla had thrown into a dumpster the day after the funeral, were my parents, my father. Robert looked thinner than I remembered. He was wearing his favorite gray cardigan, the one with the suede patches on the elbows. My mother, Alice, sat beside him, holding his hand so tightly her knuckles were white. They looked exhausted. They looked like people who were waiting for a hurricane to hit. Nora, my father said. His voice, it had been 5 years since I heard it. It was deep, gravelly, and laced with a sorrow that cut straight through the screen and into my chest. I reached out and touched the cold glass of the tablet, as if I could reach through time and fix whatever was hurting them. If you are watching this, he continued, looking directly into the camera lens, then it has been 5 years. It means you survived. It means you did not break. He paused, swallowing hard. And it means you have probably hated us for every single day of those 5 years. My mother turned her face away from the camera, wiping a tear. Oh, Robert, tell her. Just tell her why. We are doing this, my father said, his voice hardening with resolve. Because we are out of options. We are doing this because we have failed one daughter, and we refuse to fail the other. I leaned in, my heart hammering against my ribs. Failed one daughter. You think we gave the house to Marla because we loved her more, my father said. You think we cut you out because you were adopted, or because we didn't think you were successful enough. I know that is what Marla told you. I know that is what the will looked like. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Nora, we gave Marla the house because it was the only thing that would distract her long enough to save you. The screen flickered slightly. My father took a sip of water from a mug on the coffee table. Marla is in trouble. Nora, deep trouble. For the last 3 years, Calvin has been dragging her into financial schemes that are, let us call them, gray areas. High-risk loans, offshore gambling debts. They have been using my name, forging my signature on guarantor documents. I only found out last week. I stared at the screen, stunned. The rumors, the refinancing, it wasn't just incompetence, it was fraud. They owe money to people who do not file lawsuits, my father said darkly. They owe money to people who break legs. The debt is astronomical. If we died today and left the estate to be divided equally between you and Marla, the creditors would be on you within a week. Marla would panic. She would guilt you, manipulate you, or force you to sign over your share to cover her mistakes. She would drag you down with her. She is a drowning woman, my mother added, her voice trembling. And she will climb on top of you to breathe. Nora, you know she will. You have always been too kind to her. You would have given her everything to save her, and you both would have ended up with nothing. My father nodded. So we had to make a choice, a terrible, impossible choice. We had to create a firewall. He held up a piece of paper in the video. It was a diagram. The house is the bait, he explained. It is a tangible asset. It is shiny. It is what Marla wants most because she thinks it gives her status. We knew if we gave her the house, she would focus entirely on that. She would think she won. She would not look for the liquid assets. She would not look for the insurance settlements. But the house is worth millions, I whispered to the empty room. The house is leveraged, my father said, as if answering me. I took out a second mortgage 3 months ago to pay off one of Calvin's immediate threats. Marla does not know that yet. When she inherits it, she inherits the debt attached to it. It will keep her busy. It will keep her fighting the banks while you get away. We had to make you leave. Nora, my mother said, tears streaming down her face now. We had to make it so painful, so absolute, that you would never look back. We had to make Marla believe that we despised you, so she would not suspect you had the money. If she thought for 1 second that you had access to $2 million, she would never have let you leave that driveway. The $1,000 card, my father said, his voice cracking. It was theater. Nora, it was the hardest thing I have ever done. Writing that letter, treating you like a stranger, it broke my heart. But we needed you to be angry. Anger is fuel. Grief is just a weight. We needed you to be angry enough to walk away and never speak to her again. We needed you to disappear for 5 years. Why 5 years? I asked, weeping openly now. 5 years is the statute of limitations on the specific type of liability Calvin incurred, my father said. And it is the timeline our forensic accountant gave us for Marla's inevitable collapse. We calculated that she would burn through the equity in the house in roughly 60 months. By the time this trust unlocks, Marla will have no legal standing to challenge it, and her creditors will have no path to reach you. The video cut to a closer angle. My father looked directly at me. But we could not send you out there alone without a safety net. We just couldn't tell you about it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He wrote a name on it. Nathan Daniels. We know Nathan, my father said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. We know he is stubborn. We know he loves you more than he loves his own pride. We knew he would not let you freeze. We knew he would follow you into the dark. He placed the envelope on the table. We wrote this letter for him. It is a guardian letter. It contains instructions. If you had disappeared completely, or if you had gotten sick, or if Marla had tried to hurt you legally, Nathan was instructed to bring this letter to Elliot. It would have triggered an emergency release of funds for your medical care or legal defense, but the condition was that you could never know. If you knew, you wouldn't have stayed hidden. You would have tried to come back and fix things. I sobbed, covering my mouth with my hand. Nathan, they had bet my life on Nathan, and they had been right. He had starved with me. He had frozen with me. And he had never, not once, suggested we go back to beg Marla for help. We are so sorry, Nora, my mother whispered. We are so sorry we cannot be there to explain this. We are so sorry for the cold nights. We are so sorry for the hard work. But we need you to be safe. We need you to survive the winter so you can have the spring. Use the money, my father said firmly. Buy a home. Build your art. Live a life that is yours, not one that is tied to this toxic legacy. You are the best of us. Nora, you always were. The image froze on their faces, my father's determined gaze, my mother's tear-stained cheeks. Then, the screen went black. The silence in the room was different now. It was not oppressive. It was hollowed out by grief. I sat there, shaking. The realization washed over me like a physical wave. The anger I had nursed for 5 years, the hatred I had used to keep myself warm, the bitterness that had defined my marriage and my self-worth, it was all based on a lie. They hadn't abandoned me. They had saved me. They had thrown themselves in front of the train to push me off the tracks. They had accepted that their last act on earth would be to make their daughter hate them, just so she wouldn't be dragged down by the anchor that was her sister. "They loved you very much," Elliot Granger said softly from across the table. I looked up at him. My eyes burned. "You knew, all this time. You knew, when I was living in a basement with water on the floor, you knew I was a millionaire." "I knew," Elliot said, his voice heavy with regret. "And there were nights I almost broke the oath. When I heard you were working at that diner, God. Nora, I wanted to drive down there and hand you a check, but your father made me swear on his grave. He said, if you give it to her too soon, Marla will find out, and the creditors will take it all. The trust had to mature. The 5-year window had to close." He pushed the linen envelope toward me again. "The letter for Nathan is inside this one," he said. "Your mother wanted you to give it to him." I touched the envelope. I thought about Nathan, currently sleeping in our freezing car, waiting for me to come back with money for rent. He had passed the test too. He had protected me without knowing there was a reward. "What happens now?" I asked, wiping my face with the rough sleeve of my coat. Elliot adjusted his glasses. He opened a file folder on the table. "Now," he said, "we deal with the reality your parents predicted. Their timing was impeccable, almost supernatural." He slid a document across the mahogany surface. It was a public notice. Notice of trustee's sale, foreclosure auction, property, 1400 Lake Briar Drive. "This was filed yesterday," Elliot said. "Marla has defaulted on the third mortgage. She has leveraged the property to 110% of its value. She has stopped paying the property taxes. The bank is seizing the house." "She lost it," I whispered. "She actually lost it." "She did not just lose it," Elliot corrected. "She devoured it, and now she is desperate. She has been calling my office every hour for the last 3 days, demanding to know if there are any residual assets in the estate. She is hunting for crumbs." "Does she know about the trust?" "No," Elliot said. "But she knows something is wrong. She knows she is out of time." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "The auction is scheduled for Friday. It is a distressed sale. The bank just wants to recoup the primary loan. They do not care who buys it." I looked at the notice. 1400 Lake Briar Drive. My home. The place where my parents had recorded that video. The place where I had learned to walk. The place Marla had turned into a fortress of greed. A cold clarity settled over me. The tears stopped. The pain in my arms seemed to distance itself, becoming just background noise. "How much?" I asked. "The opening bid is set at $600,000, Elliot said. "The bank wants a quick exit." I looked at the balance on the screen. $2,482,000. "I want to buy it," I said. Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Nora, that house is a money pit. It is filled with bad memories." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It is my parents' house. It is the house Marla stole, and I am not going to let it go to a stranger." "If you buy it," Elliot warned, "Marla will know. She will see your name on the deed. She will realize you had the money all along. She will come for you." "Let her come," I said. My voice was steady now, strong. "I am not the same girl she threw out in the snow. She thinks I am a victim. She thinks I am weak." I reached out and picked up the silver flash drive, the evidence of the fraud, the gambling, the crimes Marla and Calvin had committed. "She doesn't know I have this," I said. Elliot looked at the drive, then back at me. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "No," he said. "She certainly does not. Can we buy it anonymously?" I asked. Can we blindside her? We can form an LLC, Elliot said, his lawyer brain kicking into gear. A shell company. We can make the purchase through a proxy. She won't know who the buyer is until the deed is transferred, until you walk up the driveway. Do it, I said. And the foreclosure? Elliot asked. Marla will try to stop it. She will try to create a scene. Let her, I said. I want her to think she is fighting a bank. I want her to think she is fighting the system. I want her to scream and cry and play the victim one last time. I stood up. I picked up the check for $900 that Henderson had prepared. It felt light in my hand, but the weight behind it was immense. I am going to pay my rent, I said. I am going to take my husband to a doctor. And then, Elliot, I want you to prepare the paperwork. We are taking back Lake Briar. It will be a pleasure, Elliot said. I walked out of the private suite. The lobby was still quiet. The customers were still going about their business, but as I walked toward the door, I saw the security guard watching me. He nodded, a gesture of respect. I pushed the doors open and stepped back into the Minneapolis winter. The wind was still cutting, the snow was still falling, but for the first time in 5 years, I did not feel cold. I felt like fire. I walked to the car where Nathan was waiting. He looked up, his face anxious, expecting me to come back with nothing, or in handcuffs. I opened the door and slid in. I handed him the check. We are okay, I said. You got it, he asked, relief washing over him. Was it hard? It was just a transaction. I lied. But Nathan, we need to talk. We are not going back to the basement tonight. What do you mean? I touched the pocket where the flash drive sat warm against my hip. We are going to a hotel, I said. A nice one. And then we are going to plan a homecoming. Nathan looked at me, confused. Homecoming to where? I looked out the window, toward the suburbs, toward the past that was about to become my future. To Lake Briar, I said. It is time to take out the trash. The first thing I did was buy silence. For 5 years, my life had been a cacophony of demanding noises, the ringtone of debt collectors, the beep of the decline at the grocery store, the rattle of the basement heater, the judgmental sighs of my landlord. Money. I realized as I sat in the lobby of the urgent care clinic, was not just currency, it was a mute button. I walked up to the billing desk. The receptionist looked at my sling and the burn cream on my neck, her eyes already hardening in anticipation of a payment plan negotiation. She had the clipboard ready, the one for the indigent patients. The bill is $1,240, she said, tapping the paper. If you cannot pay the full amount today, we need a credit card on file for monthly installments of— I will pay it in full, I said. My voice was steady. I placed the temporary check Mr. Henderson had printed for me on the counter. It was drawn from the Sanders Legacy Trust, but on the paper, it just looked like money. The receptionist blinked. She looked at the check, then at me. The hostility evaporated, replaced by a confused efficiency. She took the check. She stamped the bill paid. Thank you, Ms. Sanders, she said, and I need a copy of my medical records, I added. Specifically, the timestamp of my admission and the doctor's notes regarding the severity of the injury. I need proof that I was physically incapacitated on Tuesday night. She nodded. Of course. We left the clinic. The wind was still howling, but the knot in my stomach, the one that had been tightening for 60 months, began to loosen. Next, we went to the landlord's office. I did not scream at him. I did not throw the money in his face, though the urge was there. I simply handed him a cashier's check for the past due rent and the next 6 months in advance. I am breaking the lease, I told him as he stared at the check, his mouth slightly open. We will be moving out by the end of the week. Keep the security deposit. Consider it a tip. I walked out before he could say thank you. I did not want his gratitude. I wanted his absence. Then, we went shopping. Marla would have gone to the boutiques on 5th Street. She would have bought silk and cashmere. things that looked beautiful but offered no protection. I went to an outdoor outfitter. I stood in front of the mirror wearing a parka that was rated for 30 degrees below zero. It was black, utilitarian, and cost $600. It was not pretty. It was armor. I bought boots with titanium spikes in the soles to grip the ice. I bought wool socks that were thick enough to stop a bullet. "You look," Nathan started, watching me zip the coat up to my chin. "I look like I am ready for a siege," I finished. "Because I am." I turned to him. "Pick out a coat, Nathan, and boots, the best ones they have. We are done being cold." He hesitated, the habit of poverty still clutching his ankles. "Nora, the money we should be careful. We do not know how much legal trouble Marla is going to cause. We have $2 million in the war chest," I said, "and we cannot fight if we are freezing. Buy the coat." He did, and when we walked out of that store, the Minneapolis winter tried to bite us, but it couldn't find any skin. I felt invincible. We checked into a hotel downtown, a place with heated floors and a concierge. I set up a command center on the desk in the suite, my laptop, Nathan's tablet, and the silver flash drive my father had left me. Elliot arrived at 7 in the evening. He looked different too, energized, perhaps, by the fact that he no longer had to hide the truth. He brought a stack of files that smelled of fresh toner. "The auction is confirmed for Friday morning," Elliot said, spreading a blueprint of the Lake Briar property on the desk. "The bank has expedited the process. Marla has stopped communicating with them. According to the foreclosure agent, the house is abandoned." "Abandoned?" I asked. "Where is she?" "Still in St. Bart's, according to her Instagram," Elliot said dryly. "She is posting photos of lobster dinners while the sheriff is scheduling the lock change. It is classic denial. She believes that if she ignores it, Calvin will fix it, or perhaps she thinks she can charm her way out of it when she gets back." "She is going to be surprised," Nathan said. Looking at the documents, "We need a vehicle for the purchase," Elliot said. "If Nora Sanders buys the house, Marla will be notified immediately. The deed transfer is public record. We need a layer of separation." "An LLC," I said. "My father mentioned a shell company in the video." "Exactly," Elliot nodded. "I have taken the liberty of drafting the articles of organization for a generic holding company. We just need a name." I looked out the window at the city lights. I thought about the fire that killed my parents. I thought about the snowstorm Marla threw me into. I thought about the long, dark winter of my life. "Winterborn," I said. Elliot paused, pen hovering over the paper. "Winterborn Holdings." "Yes," I said. "Born from the winter. It fits." "Winterborn Holdings, LLC, it is." Elliot wrote it down. "I will file the papers in the morning. We will act as the registered agent. You will remain completely anonymous until the moment you choose to reveal yourself." "Good," I said. "Now, let us talk about the debts." I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The folder structure was organized by year. My father had been meticulous. He had scanned everything: loan agreements, promissory notes, emails from Calvin to shady lenders. "I need to know exactly how much she owes," I said. "And I need to know if any of it is attached to me." "I brought in some help for that," Elliot said. "I have a forensic accountant on retainer. He has been running a quiet audit based on the data in this drive for the last 4 hours. He opened a thick file. "It is ugly, Nora," Elliot warned. "Marla didn't just spend the inheritance. She leveraged it. She took out loans against the equity of the house to pay off Calvin's gambling debts. When the equity ran dry, she started taking out personal loans." "High-interest ones?" Nathan asked. "Predatory ones," Elliot corrected. "But here's the part that concerns you." He pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a loan application from a company called Quick Capital Solutions. The amount was $50,000. The date was October 14th of last year. At the bottom of the page was a signature, Nora J. Sanders. I stared at the ink. It looked like my name. It had the same loop on the N, the same sharp S. To a stranger, it was me. "I did not sign this," I said. my voice dropping to a chill whisper. I have never heard of Quick Capital Solutions. Look at the date, Nathan said, leaning over my shoulder. October 14th. He pulled out his phone and opened his calendar app. He scrolled back. October 14th, he read. That was a Friday. You worked a double shift at Cedar and Spoon. I picked you up at 2 a.m. because the bus stopped running. I was serving pancakes while someone was borrowing $50,000 in my name, I said. The anger was not hot this time. It was cold, precise, and sharp as a scalpel. She stole my identity. It is a felony, Elliot said. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery. And since the loan company operates across state lines, it is federal. There is more, Elliot said, flipping the page. We found credit inquiries for car loans, credit cards, even a small business loan application, all in your name, all denied because your credit score was well, because you were living in a basement. My poverty saved me, I realized. She tried to ruin me, but she couldn't because I was already at the bottom. She was desperate, Elliot said. When the banks cut her off, she tried to use your clean slate. She thought you were too poor and too beaten down to notice. I looked at the signature again. It was a good forgery. She must have practiced. She must have sat at my father's desk, using his pens, practicing how to become me so she could sell me out. This changes things, Nathan said. He looked at me, his jaw set. This isn't just about the house anymore. Nora, this is criminal. We can send her to prison. I looked at the paper. I thought about the police. I thought about a trial. I thought about Marla crying on the witness stand, playing the victim, blaming Calvin, blaming her grief. No, I said. Not yet. Why? Nathan asked. We have the evidence. Because if I arrest her now, I said, standing up and walking to the window, she becomes a tragedy, the poor grieving sister who made mistakes. She will get a plea deal. She will write a book. She will spin it. I turned back to them. I do not want her to have an excuse. I want her to have consequences. I want her to lose the house. I want her to stand on the curb and watch me walk through the door. And then, when she tries to sue me, when she tries to claim I stole her birthright, that is when I drop the hammer. You want her to walk into the trap, Elliot said, understanding dawning in his eyes. I want her to trigger it herself, I said. She is going to come back from St. Bart's and find the locks changed. She is going to sue. She is going to claim fraud. She is going to say that the trust is invalid or that I manipulated our parents. I tapped the photocopy of the forged loan. And when she does, when she stands in front of a judge and swears under oath that she is the rightful owner of everything I will present this, I will prove that she has been robbing me for years. I will let her perjury be the nail in her coffin. Elliot nodded slowly. It is high risk, but it is poetic. It is justice, I said. We need to verify the alibi, Elliot said, shifting into lawyer mode. The loan document has a timestamp. We need to prove conclusively that you were nowhere near that computer when the application was submitted. The diner uses a digital clock-in system, I said. It scans my fingerprint. I clocked in at 4 p.m. and clocked out at 2 a.m. The logs are on the server. I will get a subpoena for those logs first thing tomorrow, Elliot said. We will have indisputable proof that Nora Sanders was serving coffee while Nora Sanders was committing fraud. And Nathan, I said, turning to my husband, I need you to go through the rest of these files, every single piece of paper. If she forged my signature once, she did it 10 times. I want a timeline. I want to know every time she used my name to buy herself another day of luxury. Nathan sat down at the desk. He cracked his knuckles. He looked like a man who had finally found a way to fight back that didn't involve violence. I will find everything, he promised. I will find every cent. I looked at the map of Lake Briar. I traced the perimeter of the property with my finger. Friday, I said. We buy the house on Friday. And then, Elliot asked, and then we wait for her to come home. I said, I sat down in the plush hotel chair. I was warm. My belly was full. My arm was resting on a soft pillow. But my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I was not the victim anymore. I was the architect. Marla had spent 5 years building a house of cards. She didn't know that I was the one holding the wind. "One more thing," I said to Elliot. "The auction. I want to make sure we win. What if someone else bids?" Elliot smiled. "It is a cash auction. Nora, most investors need financing. You have the liquidity to outbid anyone in the room. But just to be safe, Winterborn Holdings will authorize an aggressive opening bid. We will scare the vultures away before they even lift their paddles." "Do it," I said. I looked at the blue card sitting on the desk next to the laptop. It wasn't a symbol of pain anymore. It was a tool. I picked it up and slipped it into my new, expensive coat pocket. "Let's get to work," I said. "I have a house to buy." The driveway of the Lake Briar estate was no longer the quiet, majestic entrance I remembered from my childhood. It had been transformed into a theater of the absurd. From the tinted window of the black town car, I watched the chaos unfold. It looked like a scene from a reality television show gone wrong. A massive moving truck was parked on the lawn, its wheels churning up the pristine snow my father used to obsess over. 2 sheriff's cruisers were blocking the gate, their lights flashing silently against the gray afternoon sky, and in the center of it all, wearing a white fur coat that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of foreclosure, was Marla. She was not going quietly. She was screaming at a sheriff's deputy, her arms flailing, pointing a manicured finger at the house as if sheer willpower could stop the movers who were carrying out her custom Italian sofa. Calvin was there too, looking significantly less defiant. He was leaning against the hood of their luxury SUV, head in his hands, looking like a man who was trying to calculate the distance to the nearest non-extradition country. "She is live streaming," Nathan said, looking at his phone in the seat beside me. "She has 12,000 people watching right now." I looked at the screen. Marla was holding her phone up, the camera facing her tear-stained, perfectly made-up face. "They are throwing us out," Marla wailed into the device, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. "My family home. My parents built this place with their bare hands, and now these predatory banks are stealing it because of a clerical error. We are victims of the system. Guys, please, hit the link in my bio. We need legal fees. We need justice." "She is good," Elliot Granger said from the front seat. "She almost believes it herself." "Is everything ready?" I asked. "The deed is transferred," Elliot said, tapping his briefcase. "Winterborn Holdings is the legal owner of record as of 9 this morning. The sheriff has the paperwork. The bank has their money. The stage is yours. Nora." I took a deep breath. I touched the collar of my new coat. It was thick, warm, and expensive. It felt like armor. I touched the sunglasses on my face. "Let's go," I said. The driver opened the door. I stepped out onto the asphalt. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but it did not penetrate the layers of wool and cashmere I was wearing. My boots, the ones with the titanium grip, crunched solidly on the ice. I did not slip. I would never slip again. Nathan stepped out beside me, looking sharp in his new pea coat. He stood taller than I had seen him in years. He wasn't the tired EMT from the basement anymore. He was the man who had helped me hunt down the truth. We walked up the driveway, past the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering behind their gloved hands. They were the same neighbors who had watched me leave 5 years ago and done nothing. Now, they were watching the spectacle of Marla's downfall with the same morbid curiosity. Marla saw the car. She saw the suits. She saw the air of authority. She immediately assumed I was the enemy she could negotiate with. She lowered her phone, but kept the live stream running, pivoting the camera to capture our approach. She wiped her eyes, switching instantly from hysterical victim to charming socialite. "You?" she called out, marching toward me. "You must be the representative from the investment firm, Winterborn, right?" I did not answer. I kept walking, my pace steady. "Look," Marla said. putting on a brave, trembling smile. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My husband and I have the funds coming in next week. A liquid asset transfer. If you just halt this eviction, I can pay you a premium. We can work this out like civilized people. You do not want the bad press of kicking a grieving daughter out of her parents' legacy. Do you? She was 5 feet away now. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume and panic. She looked at me, but she did not see me. She saw a coat. She saw sunglasses. She saw money. She did not look at the face. I am talking to you, Marla snapped when I did not stop. Do you know who I am? I am Marla Greer. This is my house. It was never your house, Marla, I said. My voice was calm, low, and carried on the wind. Marla froze. The color drained from her face beneath the bronzer. She knew that voice. It was the voice she had silenced 5 years ago. I reached up and took off my sunglasses. The silence that fell over the driveway was absolute. Even the movers stopped wrestling with the sofa. Calvin looked up from the SUV, his jaw dropping. The neighbors on the sidewalk stopped whispering. Marla stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at my face, then down at my coat, then at Nathan standing beside me. Her brain was trying to reconcile the image of the broken, destitute girl she had thrown out with the woman standing before her. Nora, she whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. Hello, sister, I said. You, Marla stammered, taking a step back. I thought you were dead, or in rehab. I haven't heard from you in 5 years. I know, I said. You made sure of that. Marla's eyes darted to the phone in her hand. The live stream was still running. Comments were scrolling up the screen at a frantic pace. Is that the sister I thought she said she was an only child? What is happening? She quickly tried to recover the narrative. She stepped closer to me, angling the phone so we were both in the frame. Nora, she cried, her voice pitching up into a theatrical sob of relief. Oh my God, you are alive, guys. Look, it is my baby sister. We have been looking for her for years. She ran away. She had so many problems, drugs, bad crowds, but she is home. She reached out to hug me. Oh, thank God you are safe. Did you see the news? Did you come to help us? I did not move. I did not flinch. I just looked at her. Do not touch me, I said. It was not a scream. It was a command. Marla stopped, her hands hovering in the air. Nora, honey, I know you are confused. We are losing the house. It is terrible. But now that you are here, maybe we can— I am not confused. Marla, I interrupted. And I am not here to help you. I turned to Elliot, who was standing quietly behind me with his briefcase. Mr. Granger, I said, please inform Mrs. Greer, who just purchased the property. Elliot stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Marla with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Mrs. Greer, Elliot said, the deed to 1400 Lakebriar Drive was purchased this morning at a private foreclosure settlement by Winterbourne Holdings, LLC. I don't care about the company, Marla shrieked. I want to speak to the owner. You are speaking to her, Elliot said. He gestured to me. Winterbourne Holdings is a sole proprietorship, Elliot announced, his voice projecting for the neighbors and the police to hear. Wholly owned and controlled by Ms. Nora Sanders. Marla looked at me. She looked like she had been hit by a truck. You, she wheezed. You bought it. With what? You have nothing. You are a waitress. I saw the reports. You are a nobody. I am the owner, I said, and I am evicting you. You cannot do this, Marla screamed, lunging at me. Nathan stepped in front of me, blocking her path with a solid shoulder. Marla bounced off him and stumbled back. I am your sister. I took you in. I gave you a home when Mom and Dad died. I protected you. She turned to the phone, screaming at her audience. She is lying. She is ungrateful. I gave her money. I gave her everything, and now she steals my house. You gave me nothing, I said. I nodded to Nathan. He pulled a tablet out of his bag. He had connected it to a portable Bluetooth speaker he had set on the hood of the car. You say you protected me, I asked. You say you treated me like family. Let us see. Nathan pressed play. The sound was tinny at first, then clear. It was the audio from the video doorbell system of the Lake Briar house. The date stamp was from 5 years ago. Marla's voice boomed across the driveway. I am the blood daughter. You were a project. You were a pity case. Marla gasped. She tried to grab the speaker, but the sheriff's deputy stepped between her and the car. Take it, the recording continued. Consider it a severance package. I am their daughter, too, my voice from the past sobbed. Are you really? Marla's recorded voice sneered. You have 10 minutes to get out. The neighbors were silent. The movers had stopped working. The only sound was the wind and the damning recording of Marla's cruelty. Do not even think about running up there. The recording played. I will call the police and report a burglary in progress. Do you want that on your record? Nora, a foster kid stealing from a grieving family. The recording ended. I looked at Marla. She was shaking. Her phone was still in her hand, but her arm had dropped to her side. The live stream comments were moving so fast they were a blur. Monster. Evil. Is this real? Unfollow. That, Marla stammered, her face pale. That is manipulated. That is you faked that. It is the original cloud backup from the security system. Marla, I said. You forgot to delete the archives when you changed the account password. Nathan didn't. This is private family business, Calvin shouted from the car. You cannot play that in public. You made it public. Calvin, I said, pointing to Marla's phone. You wanted an audience. You wanted sympathy. Well, now you have an audience. I took a step closer to Marla. 5 years, I said. I lived in a basement with mold on the walls. I ate expired food. I walked to work in the snow with holes in my shoes, and I watched you post photos from yachts and galas. I watched you spend my father's money on a life you did not earn. I was investing, Marla cried. I was trying to save the estate. You were stealing, a new voice said. A man in a dark gray suit stepped out from behind the sheriff's car. He was holding a thick file folder. I recognized him. He was the forensic accountant Elliot had hired. Mr. Sterling. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a representative from the bank. Mrs. Greer? Mr. Sterling said. I am representing the fraud division of First National. Marla looked at him, confusion warring with fear. Fraud? What are you talking about? This is a foreclosure. The foreclosure is a civil matter, Mr. Sterling said calmly. But the loan application you submitted on October 14th of last year, that is a criminal matter. He held up the photocopy of the document I had seen the night before. This is a promissory note for $50,000, Mr. Sterling said. It is signed by Nora J. Sanders. It uses her social security number. It lists her previous address. So, Marla said, her eyes darting around. Maybe she signed it. She is broke. She probably needed the money. We have time cards. Mr. Sterling said. Biometric logs. At the exact moment this document was digitally signed from an IP address registered to this house, Miss Sanders was clocked in at a diner in St. Louis Park, serving tables under video surveillance. Calvin made a noise like a strangled cat. He tried to slide into the driver's seat of the SUV, but a second deputy was already standing at the door. That is identity theft, Mr. Sterling continued. And since the funds were wired across state lines, it is wire fraud. And since you used the property as collateral for a loan obtained through fraud, that is mortgage fraud. Marla looked at Calvin. You said you fixed it. You said you used your own credit. I couldn't, Calvin yelled, his facade crumbling instantly. My credit is shot. You were the one who said, use her name. She will never know. She is probably dead in a ditch somewhere. The confession hung in the air. Marla realized what he had said. She realized the camera was still on. She realized the police were listening. She turned back to me. The anger was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was a terrified, pathetic desperation. "Nora," she whimpered. She dropped the phone. It cracked on the asphalt. She fell to her knees in the snow. "Nora, please, do not let them take me. I am your sister. I am the only family you have." I looked down at her. She looked small. The white fur coat was stained with mud from the driveway. "You are not my family," I said. I looked at Nathan. He was watching me, proud and steady. "He is my family," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the scratched, blue debit card. I held it up so she could see it. "You gave me $1,000 to disappear," I said. "You thought that was what I was worth." I dropped the card. It landed in the snow next to her knees. "Keep it," I said. "You are going to need it for the commissary." I turned my back on her. "Sheriff," I said to the officer, "these people are trespassing on private property. Please remove them." "Yes, ma'am," the sheriff said. As I walked toward the front door of the house, my house, I heard the sound of handcuffs clicking. I heard Marla screaming my name, begging, bargaining, blaming, but the wind took her voice and carried it away, leaving only the sound of my boots on the steps, echoing like a gavel bringing down the final judgment. I reached the heavy oak door. The wreath of lilies was gone, replaced by a generic "for sale" sign. I ripped the sign down. I opened the door. The smell of the house rushed out to meet me. It didn't smell like lemon polish anymore. It smelled stale, like neglect, but underneath that, I could smell the faint, ghostly scent of the past. "We are home," Nathan said, stepping in behind me. "Not yet," I said, looking at the empty hallway where I had been exiled. "First, we clean." I thought the handcuffs were the end. I thought seeing Marla escorted into the back of a police cruiser was the period at the end of the sentence, but I had underestimated the sheer, desperate tenacity of a narcissist who is terrified of being poor. 48 hours after the scene in the driveway. While I was walking through the empty rooms of Lake Briar, trying to decide which ghosts to keep and which to evict, a process server knocked on the door. He handed me a thick packet of documents. Marla had sued me. It was an emergency injunction filed by a high-priced criminal defense attorney she had undoubtedly retained on credit. The lawsuit sought to freeze the assets of the Sanders Legacy Trust and invalidate the purchase of the house. But the legal argument was not about fraud or numbers. It was about blood. We sat in the deposition room 3 days later. It was a glass-walled conference room in downtown Minneapolis, overlooking the gray, frozen city. Marla was there, out on bail, wearing a modest navy suit that screamed "wrongfully accused." She looked tired, but her eyes were manic. Her lawyer, a shark named Mr. Sterling, no relation to our accountant, slid a motion across the table. "The plaintiff asserts that the Sanders Legacy Trust violates the original intent of the family estate," the lawyer said smoothly. "The argument is simple. Nora Sanders is not a biological descendant of Robert and Alice Sanders. She was a ward of the state, the exclusion of the natural-born daughter, Marla Greer, in favor of an adopted child, constitutes undue influence and a deviation from the lineage rights implicit in the state probate code." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was the old knife, the same knife she had twisted 5 years ago. "You are a project. You are a pity case." She was trying to use my adoption against me in a court of law. She was trying to define me, legally and publicly, as an outsider, as an imposter. "She is not their blood," Marla said from across the table. Her voice was shaky but venomous. "Mom and Dad were confused. They were old. They would never have given a stranger $2 million and left their own daughter with nothing. She manipulated them." I looked at her. For a moment, I was 27 again, standing in the snow, believing her. I felt the shame rise up, the feeling that I didn't belong, that I was just a guest who had overstayed her welcome. "This is not a legal argument," Elliot Granger said, his voice cold. "This is a character assassination. It is a motion to dismiss your standing," Marla's lawyer countered. And until a judge rules on the biological legitimacy of the heir, the assets remain frozen. You cannot touch the house. You cannot touch the money. Marla smiled. It was a small, terrified, triumphant smile. She thought she had found the loophole. She thought she could drag this out for years, forcing me to settle just to make it stop. I looked at the table. I looked at my hands. I felt small. Then, the door opened. Nathan walked in. He was holding a sealed plastic bag. Inside was a yellowed envelope. He walked past me, past Elliot, and stood directly in front of Marla. "You really do not know them at all, do you?" Nathan asked. "Who let him in here?" Marla snapped. "He is not a party to this suit." "I am a witness," Nathan said, "and I am the custodian of the rebuttal." He placed the bag on the table. "Robert and Alice knew you would do this," Nathan said. "They predicted it. They told me, 5 years ago, that if you ever found out about the money, your first move would be to attack Nora's adoption. They knew you were that cruel." Nathan looked at Elliot. "Read the guardian letter, Elliot, the second paragraph." Elliot opened the file he had prepared. He put on his reading glasses. "This is a notarized letter of instruction left in the care of Nathan Daniels," Elliot announced. Dated 5 years ago, he began to read. "To our executors and the court, we anticipate that our daughter Marla may attempt to contest this trust based on Nora's biological status. Let it be known, clearly and unequivocally, that Nora Sanders is our daughter in every way that matters. We chose her, and because we know Marla's prejudice, we have included the poison pill clause." Marla's lawyer stiffened. "The what?" "The poison pill," Elliot said. He flipped to the back of the trust document, a section that had been redacted until this moment. Clause 84, Section C. Elliot looked directly at Marla. "It states that any beneficiary or potential claimant who challenges the validity of this trust, based on the adoptee status of the primary beneficiary, shall immediately trigger a mandatory audit of all previous financial interactions with the estate. Furthermore, the filing of such a claim is essentially an admission of hostile intent, which legally unseals the evidence file for the district attorney." "What does that mean?" Marla whispered. "It means," Elliot said, closing the folder, "that by filing this lawsuit, you just authorized us to hand over everything to the prosecutor. You pulled the pin on the grenade yourself. Marla?" Marla looked at her lawyer. He was already packing up his briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. "I can withdraw the suit," Marla stammered. "I will withdraw it right now. We can settle." "It is too late," I said. I spoke for the first time. The shame was gone. The guardian letter had washed it away. My parents had protected me from the grave. They had known she would use the blood argument, and they had turned it into a trap. "I am not settling," I said, "and I'm not done." Elliot signaled to the door. The forensic accountant, Mr. Sterling, walked in. He was carrying a laptop and a projector. "Mrs. Greer mentioned undue influence," I said, standing up. "She claims I manipulated my parents, but the data suggests that the only person manipulating the Sanders name was her." Mr. Sterling connected the laptop. A spreadsheet appeared on the wall. "This is a log of IP addresses and digital signatures." Mr. Sterling said, "We cross-referenced the dates of the loans taken out in Nora Sanders' name with the work schedule of Nora Sanders. We have video," Nathan added. "We have Nora serving coffee at the exact second Nora was signing a $50,000 promissory note from a computer located in the master bedroom of Lake Briar." The screen changed. It showed a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a time-stamped security video from the diner showing me wiping a table. On the right, a digital loan application being finalized with my forged signature. "This is identity theft," Elliot said. 20 counts, 1 for each loan, 1 for each credit card." "But here's the twist," I said, looking at Calvin, who had been sitting silently in the corner, trying to be invisible. "We found the emails." Calvin flinched. "Marla didn't know how to set up the shell accounts to hide the money," I said. "She isn't that tech-savvy. But you are. Calvin. Mr. Sterling clicked a button. An email chain appeared. It was between Calvin and a loan shark. Subject: the sister. Body. Don't worry about repayment. We are using her identity as a shield. If the loan goes bad, it hits her credit. Not ours. She is a ghost anyway. No one will look. Marla turned slowly to look at her husband. You said... Marla's voice trembled. You said you were protecting me. You said we were borrowing against the business. I was trying to save the house, Calvin shouted, sweat pouring down his face. You were the one spending $5,000 a week on clothes. You were the one who needed the country club membership. I had to find the money somewhere. So you stole my sister's name, Marla screamed. You signed the papers, Calvin yelled back. I just set up the accounts. You clicked agree. You knew you told me she didn't matter. I did not know it was a crime, Marla wailed. Ladies and gentlemen, Elliot interrupted, his voice dry. I believe we just heard a mutual confession to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The court reporter has that. Correct. The stenographer in the corner nodded, her fingers flying across the keys. Marla looked at me. The fight went out of her. The arrogance, the anger, the entitlement, it all drained away, leaving a hollow shell. She slumped in her chair. Nora, she wept. Please, I am facing 20 years. If you drop the charges, if you just say you gave us permission, I will go away. I will never bother you again. Please, I do not want to go to prison. I cannot survive in prison. I looked at her. I thought about the basement. I thought about the night my heater died, and I huddled against Nathan for warmth. I thought about the pain in my arm that I couldn't afford to treat. I cannot drop the charges, I said. It is out of my hands. The poison pill clause sent the file to the district attorney this morning. It is the people of Minnesota versus Marla Greer now. But you can help me, she begged. You have the money. You can hire me a lawyer. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. Do not let me lose everything. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the city. You lost everything 5 years ago. Marla, I said. You just didn't realize it until today. You lost your parents. You lost your sister. And you lost your soul. The house was just the last thing to go. I turned back to her. I am not going to save you, I said. Because if I do, you will never learn. You will just find someone else to use. Someone else to blame. I looked at Calvin. And you? I said. You let her do it. You encouraged it. You are just as guilty. The door opened again. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. They had been waiting for the deposition to end. Marla Greer, Calvin Greer, one of them said. We have warrants for your arrest on federal charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Marla screamed as they pulled her up. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with betrayal. I am your sister, she howled. No, I said softly. You are just a cautionary tale. I watched them drag her out. I watched Calvin trying to plead with the officer, blaming his wife, blaming the economy, blaming everyone but himself. When the door closed, the room was quiet. Nathan walked over and took my hand. Elliot closed his file. It is done, Elliot said. The trust is secure. The house is yours. The criminal case is a slam dunk. It does not feel like a victory, I said. It feels like a funeral. It is, Nathan said. It is the funeral for the last 5 years. Now we can finally bury them. We drove back to Lake Briar that afternoon. The for sale sign was gone. The movers were gone. The driveway was empty. I unlocked the front door. The house was cold. The heat had been turned off for weeks. I walked into the living room. The spot where Marla had thrown the debit card at me was just a patch of hardwood floor. The spot where Nathan had almost punched Calvin was just empty space. I walked up the stairs. I went to the master bedroom, my parents' room. Marla had redecorated it in cold grays and silvers, stripping away the warmth my mother had built. It looked like a hotel room. I sat on the edge of the bed. I took a deep breath. We are going to change it back, I said to Nathan, who was standing in the doorway. Paint? He asked. Everything, I said. But not just the paint. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook for the Sanders Legacy Trust. I am not going to live like Marla, I said. I am not going to hoard this. I am not going to use it to buy yachts and status. What are you going to do? I am going to start a foundation, I said. The Alice and Robert Sanders Initiative. I looked out the window at the snow covering the expansive lawn. There are kids aging out of the foster system every day in Minneapolis, I said. Kids like I was. They turn 18, and the state hands them a trash bag for their clothes and kicks them out. They have nowhere to go. They have no safety net. I looked at Nathan. I want to turn this house into a transition home, I said. A real home, not a shelter. A place where they can live for free while they go to college or trade school. A place where they can learn to manage money so no one can ever take advantage of them. A place where they are safe. Nathan smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile with his whole face in 5 years. Marla would hate that, he said. Foster kids running around her estate. Good, I said. That is the best reason to do it. I looked at the blue debit card one last time. I didn't need it anymore. I had the truth, I had my husband, and I had a purpose. I wasn't the victim of a revenge story anymore. I was the author of a redemption story. Let's get to work, I said. We have a lot of beds to buy. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this journey, please make sure to subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need to hear that justice is possible. See you in the next story.